While Britain had long ruled the waves, Germany was rising, having just won the Franco-Prussian War. France, meanwhile, was determined to reclaim its lost glory, and a new and rapidly unifying Italy was also emerging as a player. Europe was a continent on the rise, and its nations were competing fiercely for power and resources. The competing imperial armies were pushing deeper and deeper inland into Africa, setting the stage for a major confrontation. In February 1885, the rival European powers convened in Berlin and signed the Act of Berlin. The agreement was intended to abolish slavery and allow free trade, but it also had the effect of legalizing and legitimizing the ongoing scramble for Africa. The act drew arbitrary borders across the continent, dividing political units and ethnic groups, often without regard for practical or geographical considerations. The carving up of Africa was geographical madness, as European powers drew lines on the map based on incomplete information and assumptions in places they had never even been or had an idea what the land looked like or who lived there. This resulted in fractures, with water sources being cut off and peoples being divided in half. The impact of the act and the subsequent colonization that followed were felt deeply by the African people. They were completely unaware of the proceedings in Berlin and had no say in the decisions that were made about their land and resources. For them, the results were devastating, with the harsh consequences of colonization often resulting in displacement, violence, and loss of autonomy. The European powers that scrambled for Africa were keen to portray their actions as being more than just the result of self-interest. They made a moral case for imperialism, arguing that their motives were to bring civilization, Christianity, and progress to the African people. They claimed that the African people were living in darkness and ignorance, and that the Europeans had a duty to enlighten and uplift them. This moral justification caught the imagination of the public and helped to justify the brutalities of colonialism. The construction of rail tracks and shipping lanes were seen not just as a means of exploiting resources, but also as a way of bringing progress and modernity to Africa. This justification also helped to assuage the consciences of European powers, who knew that their actions were causing harm and destruction. Yet, the idea of civilizing the African people was fraught with racist overtones and the idea of Western superiority. The term primitive was used to describe African people and their culture, completely disregarding the rich diversity and history of African societies. This justification belies the intense racism that lay at the heart of European imperialism, with the colonizers often considering themselves superior to those they colonized. The partnership with the church was seen as being particularly advantageous for the colonialists, as it gave them access to an intimate knowledge of living conditions in Africa and the social services that could be provided. The alliance between church and state also gave an appearance of morality to imperial endeavors, a notion which had lingered since Europe's perception of Africa began to form. The idea that Africa was backward and primitive had been firmly entrenched in European minds for centuries of biased storytelling. For Christian missionaries and many other colonialists, this gave their efforts what they believed was a humanitarian purpose. They felt that they were bringing civilization to those who were living in darkness and saw their mission as one of enlightenment.